I'm just going to pause here and share my screen again. Just got that message. Okay. All right. Screen sharing looks like I'm good. All right. Okay. So it is our transit moment in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Our region is one of the fastest growing in North America. At present estimates, and of course things can change as we are looking at evolving federal policy around immigration, but at the most recent forecasts, our population was expected to grow to almost 15 million by the year 2051, which takes us to comparable to present day Paris or London. The southern part of the City of Toronto's subway system is nearing capacity. And while the drop in ridership during and after the pandemic has given the city and the region a slight reprieve from that pressure, it's trending upward again. And of course, in transit, we also need to be thinking of the long term. There may be some folks from the TTC on the line this evening, I'm not sure, but I imagine they'd be able to speak in greater detail about current ridership levels. But at Metrolinx, my colleagues that work in the Go Transit department have noted that we've hit and we've surpassed pre-pandemic ridership levels. And that's really led by weekend and off-peak leisure travel, which is quite interesting. It just goes to show the changing travel dynamics across the region. And amidst all of that, Metrolinx is leading what is an $80 billion capital infrastructure program. So what's that going to get us? Lots of stats on the screen here, and tunneling for the ECLRT in the background, but 40 plus kilometers of new subway lines, 50 of new LRTs, 200 plus of new GO rail tracks, and that really being the largest of all of the Metrolinx projects. And in fact, it consists of dozens and dozens of projects with specialized staff and other community engagement directors that support it. All of this represents an over 50% increase in new subway lines, and by my math, a 38% increase in our regional tracks. And so, what does this look like? So, this, of course, is a pretty busy map. My intent is not to dig into this map in detail, as there isn't enough time, and you need a small army to support us. But I want to talk briefly about connecting communities, because that is the Metrolinx mission. And this map helps to paint a picture of the region of the future. So it shows our existing and under construction transit lines, as well as those where studies are progressing, like a potential extension to the Shepherd subway and a potential extension to the Eglinton Crosstown West Extension. And this community, this region, spans 11,000 square kilometers, 50 municipalities, over 620 elected officials, and over 1,500 stakeholder groups. Those are the communities that we're trying to connect, working alongside municipal partners and transit providers. So let's switch gears and we'll take a trip over to Line 5, Eglinton. Of course, the biggest news in transit in the city is that Line 5, aka the Crosstown, has opened. As I mentioned before, I hope all of the locals on the call have had the chance to ride it. I've only been on it once so far, but looking forward to taking the line end to end. This image here is, I think it's a pretty neat image of Caledonia Station with the kind of the retro look and feel poster art placed there above the platforms. Now, a bit about Line 5. Of course, it opened last month, just over a month ago now, a month and a couple of days ago. 19 kilometers of light rail transit, 25 stations and stops. But right now, the TTC has soft launched with an introductory service running until 11 each night. And the intent there is to create some buffer, some overnight space for fine tuning as the TTC has operated the line and adjusts to real world conditions, what it's like to have thousands of passengers on it each day. And that also creates an overnight extended maintenance window for them to do any touch-ups that need to be done on the system. In those after hours right now, buses are providing service along Eglinton Avenue East and West. And what I just emphasize here, and I don't have it on the slide, but I just want to say that the TTC as the operator and Metrolinx as the owner are really open and hoping for much feedback from community members that are using the project, using the new line. The TTC has a survey on its website looking for feedback, and I do encourage you to visit the TTC website. Just Google TTC Line 5 and you'll find the survey on there to provide that feedback. In the meantime, that's a picture of the fare gates at Cedarvale Station and the public art tucked in behind there. And ever so briefly, I'll wrap up on Line 5. It's been performing at present as expected about 98% of the time. So here we're looking at the reliability of the vehicles, on-time performance, and so on. But how did we get here? There was many months of testing that happened beforehand. And that included things like running the line at full capacity in all weather, including 10 centimeters of snowfall, operating the fleet more than 11,000 kilometers each week to replicate customer service, maintaining that sort of service 16 hours a day. So really trying to pick up on lessons learned from elsewhere to ensure that service was reliable and airtight once everybody was ready to press the go button. Metrolinx and TTC staff actually participated, well, some of them got to participate in a simulation event in January. So got to experience the line in action, take part, ride end to end as simulated passengers, and they got to help evaluate performance. One of the perks, perhaps, of spending time working on that project. Speaking of which, I hope to be able to ride the test rides on some of these projects that are currently under construction. What we have here in the background of this slide is a pile rig building the sea Kent pile walls of a future station at Eglinton and Royal York. And in the background is the heritage designated Mary Read House, a City of Toronto property. And so with that, I'll switch into that trio of projects that are under construction, continuing to get a little bit more granular as we go along here. We're going to talk tonight about that westward extension of the Line 5 Eglinton, so Eglinton Crosstown West Extension, or ECWE for short, the Ontario line, and then the Scarborough Subway Extension, which is an east and northward extension of Line 2 into the heart of Scarborough. So let's turn over first to the Eglinton Crosstown West Extension, the ECWE. So I'm not going to read everything on the slide here, but suffice to say we've got 9.2 kilometers of new transit extending further west into Etobicoke and on into Mississauga at Renfort Station. 7 new stations here and a whole multitude of connections to other regional and municipal transit. What I'm always interested in is the service that a new line brings to communities, and the estimates peg this one at bringing higher order transit to 37,500 residents, of which roughly 4,800 are low-income residents. Now, this project is being built in 3 broad sections, and I'm going to take you on a little tour, starting in the west and heading east, beginning with the longest section that is tunneled underground, 6.3 kilometers with 2 tunnel boring machines, or TBMs. We'll jump to that in just a moment. Then we'll go above ground to an elevated guideway, or in plain language, a bridge across the Humber River Valley and Eglinton Flats. And then an even shorter tunneled segment, which is the final 500 meters to Mount Dennis Station. So I promised you that I'd share some of the behind the scenes moments that have really fascinated me since joining Metrolinx 4 years ago. One of those was going inside a tunnel boring machine. So back in summer of 2023, I had that opportunity to go down into the tunnels of the Eglinton Crosstown West Extension and ride, I think it was possibly a couple of kilometers along in a little people mover contraption. And eventually we ended up at a tunnel boring machine. I didn't quite know what to expect at the time, but I can tell you these machines are huge. So 6.5 meters across and 132 meters long. Uh, this part here, we're sort of at the tail end of it, if I recall correctly. And there's a whole sophisticated machinery at the very, very front that's crunching away at the bedrock rather, soil and the gravel and everything underground. And plus these really interesting, like automated arms that put concrete tunnel liners, so reinforced rings or ring segments in place as it moves along, which creates the tunnel surface around you. And it roughly moves about 10 to 15 meters a day. So we're using tunnel boring machines on all three of these projects, but in different sizes and shapes. And they move at different speeds depending on the ground conditions and so on. But this one was about 10 to 15 meters a day. One of the many things I found fascinating, in addition to looking at the sophisticated equipment in there, the computers, the pressure sensors, monitoring that we're keeping the soil and the shale, bedrock, and so on out and away from us. But I was fascinated to learn that people who are on shift working in TBMs well done down the tunnel generally will spend their entire shift down there. It's too long to take that little vehicle in and out several kilometers. So they bring their lunch down there. Hey, there's a washroom down there, and that's where they stay over the course of their shift. And this is what a TBM looks like at the end of its journey. This is Rexy, which was the first of the two tunnel boring machines for the Crosstown West Extension to break through at the what we call an extraction shaft. That was in April of 2024. And Rennie broke through its sister TBM about a month later, and then we took apart the machines and pulled them out. And fast forwarding to where we are today, this picture was taken, I imagine, just prior to the winter, but it gives you a sense of what that space looks like today. That's the same spot, but it's been continued to be built out and polished, and that will eventually be that portal where the trains come in and out of that underground portion. Apologies, there's a little bit of blurriness, I imagine, with this being blown up to full size. I just wasn't able to find the original of this JPEG, but I thought it was a really interesting picture here. And this, just for reference, this is at Scarlett Road and Eglinton Avenue West, just a bit west of the Humber River. So when those trains are heading further east, they're going to go onto that elevated guideway or bridge. This is a photo of that guideway under construction right now. It's going to be about 1.5, 1.5 kilometers long, with 34 pier sections like this along that breadth of the guideway. And I'm going to pause here my remarks and we'll switch into a video. It's just under a minute long and it'll describe this elevated guideway.
Let's take a look at a vital part of the Eglinton Crosstown West Extension, the elevated section. This part of the route will run on a 1.5 kilometers bridge or guideway from just west of Scarlett Road to east of Jane Street. The guideway will run along the north side of Eglinton Avenue West before heading underground again and connecting to the Mount Dennis station. The stations at Scarlett Road and Jane Street will also be elevated. It crosses the Humber River in a floodplain zone. Elevating the line here is the best way to provide safe, reliable, rapid transit to Mount Dennis. Building the elevated guideway is critical to moving forward on the Eglinton Crosstown West Extension. The project will extend the Crosstown LRT another 9.2 kilometers farther west, cutting commute times by up to 22 minutes and reducing annual greenhouse gas emissions by 5,800 tons along the way.
So that's a bit of an explanation of the elevated guideway, and I recognize that um, uh, in the city of Toronto, we know rail crosses large bridges like TTC Line 2 approaching Old Mill, and certainly our existing subway lines go above ground and somewhat elevated in some spaces, but this is a particularly visible stretch of that. Maybe another comparison might be the Up Express as it gets closer to the airport. But we know from around the world it's a really viable way of building transit. It's generally a faster and less expensive way of building transit, and it certainly creates beautiful views for those that are on it, as well as opportunities for placemaking and activations beneath it, depending on that urban fabric or the place where that transit's built. So hey, I'll pivot and almost about to wrap up on ECWE and moving over into the Ontario line. This is another tunnel. So I've been lucky enough to go into both tunnels for the ECWE. This is that shorter 500-meter segment. It's a different look and feel. So this one's being built through sequential excavation method. Essentially, it's being dug out sort of by hand, by small machines, rotor headers, and so on, which are carving a path through this space, eventually ending up at Mount Dennis Station, where we've already got this excavation pit just in front of the existing station to the south. You can see Eglinton Avenue West, just a little bit of a slice in the bottom right of the image right there. This space, it didn't really make sense to use TBMs because the length was so short. It's a very short segment. And as well, the high concentration of sand in that space didn't make it especially conducive for TBMs, which really like rock and going deeper. So essentially what you're seeing there is the space where the trains are going to pass out of the existing Mount Dennis station and then along out to that elevated guideway that I mentioned earlier. So let's swing over to the Ontario line. And I'm sure many of you have heard of the Ontario line. In a previous incarnation, it was known as the Downtown Relief Line. It's been designed in such a way that it's going to ease crowding on existing transit networks, and in particular, that pinch point at Yonge and Bloor. I imagine all of us that live in the city of Toronto have experienced Yonge and Bloor at rush hour. And this project is designed to relieve that, particularly the passenger traffic that is coming from the eastern end of Line 2, by offering an interchange station at Pape, which then allows people to swoop down into the downtown core without continuing further west across to Bloor and then south. Ultimately, this line is designed to help people get from end to end in about 30 minutes compared to the 70 that it takes on transit today. It might be a bit faster now that the Crosstown is up and running, but ultimately, this is going to be especially valuable to people living in the northeastern edge of our city there, or at least the northeastern edge of the map, Thorncliffe Park, Flemington Park, and up near the Don Valley, which really until the Crosstown opened was not well served by transit. Certainly lots of bus lines, but it did not have higher order transit to the stations. So ultimately, the goal of this project is to take about 28,000 cars off the road each day. So a significant increase, positive impact on greenhouse gas emissions and car trips in the city. So I didn't plan on zipping through each and every station because there are so many of them. And so therefore, to kick off my talk on this project, I'm going to turn to a video filmed with one of my colleagues, Rubab. Gives you, as you can see, a bird's eye view of the project and just what to expect in the city of Toronto.
The Ontario line is taking shape across Toronto, and we're digging deep on all the details. But first, we need to go high. Really high. from Exhibition Station to the Don Valley, get a bird's eye view of the progress we're making on the Ontario line. At Exhibition, we've completed excavation for the launch shaft that will allow 2 tunnel boring machines to carve out the southern portion of the Ontario line. We're also realigning tracks, building new platforms, and starting work on 2 new station entrances in the area. Across the downtown core, excavation is complete at Moss Park and currently underway at King Bathurst, Queen Spadina, Queen, and Corktown. And here at the Don Yard, crews are digging out the spot where Ontario line trains will emerge from underground. And construction is underway on the new Lower Don Bridge, will carry Ontario line trains across the Don River and the Don Valley Parkway. Just east of the Don River, through Riverside and Leslieville, we've laid down 2 kilometers of new tracks and shifted almost 900 meters of existing track to make room for the Ontario line. From here, future Ontario line trains will move from the above-ground tracks to underground tunnels below Cape Avenue. We recently broke ground on the tunnel launch shaft, where 2 tunnel boring machines will begin digging out the second underground section of the line. Over at Pape and Danforth, where the Ontario line will connect to TTC's Line 2, crews have finished building slurry walls, thick concrete barriers that help keep the site stable during digging. The site is now getting ready for excavation. Heading north up the Don Valley, work is underway to prepare for the elevated guideways that will carry Ontario line trains across the ravine and connect with Line 5 Eglinton. And here in Thorncliffe Park, we're laying the foundation for the Ontario line's future operations, maintenance, and storage facility, where Ontario line trains will be serviced and stored for daily use. When it's all done, the Ontario line will stretch through the heart of downtown Toronto, feature 15 stations, 15.6 kilometers of new subway service, and connect seamlessly with the TTC, GO trains, and Line 5 Eglinton. Want to keep an eye on all the action? Visit a local Ontario Line community office and meet with our team. And follow Ontario Line on social media and watch as Toronto's newest subway line takes flight.
Okay, so seeing that video gives me hope that summer is on the horizon. Although if we listen to the weather forecasts, apparently we're getting snow this weekend. But as you can tell, that video was filmed last summer. So we've made progress since then. Some of the photos reflect where we were when the grass was green and trees had leaves, but it gives you that quick overview of the project. And now I'm going to hop across just a few of the interesting sites and tell a few interesting stories. As Rubab mentioned in the video, we have TBMs on this project, and in fact, we've got 4 of them. 2 will tunnel from Exhibition Station, which is pictured here, across the downtown core right through to Corktown in the eastern part of the downtown core. One of them, named Libby, was lowered underground last month, and her sister Corky is scheduled to arrive later this spring. These are comparable in size to the TBMs on the ECWE. They're about 7 meters across, and they're going to dig quite deep as 40 meters underground into the Georgian Shale. And there are a couple of reasons for that. It makes tunneling very predictable for the TBM operators. It's safer and certainly more predictable. But the downtown core also has some very unique features. And by that, I mean buildings and lots of basements and parking structures. We have existing subways and utilities and sewers. So by going deep, we can avoid those. Later on, and I believe it's either later this year or early next, 2 TBMs will launch from a separate site up at Gerrard and Carlaw, and they'll travel north under Pape Avenue, building a pair of tunnels there. So let's move a little further east to Queen Street and University Avenue, where we'll find Osgood Station. I thought this would be an interesting illustration to show you how we're tunneling beneath an existing subway line and underneath University Avenue right now. So to position you with this illustration, in the left, kind of top left-hand corner, that's actually the south side. The gray lines diagonally across the illustration are actually University Avenue and pointing up to the north and the right. The north shaft there is at Queen and University on the northeast corner, and the south shaft is at Queen and Simcoe. We've already dug deep underground in both sites, and now we're digging a tunnel from the south end to the north end using that type of tunneling I mentioned earlier called SEM, or sequential excavation method, digging layer by layer and digging out the tunnel. As they go along, they do something called shotcrete rather, and they reinforce the tunnel. And then ultimately, that's where the trains will run. But first, the TBMs will pass through that area to carve out some specific tunnels. That's all happening underground 24/7, so 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with expected completion later this spring. And speaking of Osgood Station, I wanted to talk a bit about something you're probably seeing above ground at both sites. And you may not have seen this picture. So if you've been through the downtown core recently, you've probably seen some giant white structures. They almost look like wedding tents or something, but we've got a couple of those at the Osgood site, one at Simcoe, one at Queen University. We've got another one over at Yonge and Queen. We're building a movable one at Exhibition. What those are called is they're called acoustic sheds. And as you might imagine, they're designed to reduce the noise from construction. They also help to protect the construction site, including staff, from the elements. And when you combine the both of those, that allows us to put more hours in with less disruption to people living and working around them. But they're also not just about noise, they're also quite functional. So those white supports, those struts crossing across the top of the image there are actually crane supports for a gantry crane rather, used to lift materials in and out of the excavation pit. And we choose these sites based on suitability. So we need to be able to dig down into the bedrock to install the crane and its supports. So you need a big enough site for that. And then the site needs to have enough ongoing work that's likely to be noisy and disruptive that it warrants the effort and the cost of building a shed. So that's why in some cases you don't see them on some sites. We're going to move a little further east, and when I saw these photos, I thought I really wanted to include them in tonight's presentation. So this is Moss Park, located at Sherbourne and Queen Streets. I loved that picture on the right-hand side, taken at night. This is from Sherbourne facing west towards the downtown core, Queen Street's on the left there. And what you can see are cement trucks lined up and concrete pumpers reaching down into the excavation pit. And on the left, you see all the people down there. And here we're talking like 35, 40 meters deep, I would imagine. And what they're doing is pouring the final major structural slab that forms the base of the subway station and where the TBMs will eventually pass through. So what's interesting about this site and another one called Corktown is that these major pours, concrete pours, they got started late at night or very early in the morning, depending on how you describe it. The trucks would be arriving at 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning to line up, and then the pouring would take place in one continuous effort up to 11 o'clock p.m. And the construction engineers tell me that that's because of the sheer size of the station and the slabs being produced. You needed to do it all in one continuous pour so you avoid weak points and you've got that structural integrity of the concrete. Whereas smaller sites, you could build one after the other. You can get like an entire layer in a much shorter period of time. I loved this infographic that the team had put together for a committee meeting, and so I wanted to share it tonight. So what goes into all of that? Well, 7,300 cubic meters of poured concrete. Let's just say that's a lot. 950 tons of rebar were installed. So our good friends at Microsoft Copilot tell us that that's about the equivalent of about 158 adult African elephants. I'll take their word for it. I've corroborated it elsewhere, but that's a whole lot of rebar, and we're just getting started. And 812 cement truck deliveries. And through that entire process, we supported the local neighborhood. We did not receive any complaints or any concerns about noise and traffic and disruption in that neighborhood during this concrete pour process. And then moving right along, the Ontario line continues east into Leslieville, Riverside. And so it eventually moves above ground and into a place we now call the Joint Corridor. And we call it a joint corridor because we are building out additional tracks so the Ontario line can run jointly alongside the GO trains. So at present, within the Metrolinx property line, we've got 3 GO tracks. And I should say in the past, we had 3 GO tracks. What we've done is we've built that out within the existing property line to a future state of 4 GO tracks and then a pair of Ontario line tracks for the north-south movement of the subways. And just to be clear, they will be on completely separate tracks and running on their own right-of-way there. Something that's unique about this area of the project that some of you may have heard is that the design of the public realm, so things like the outdoor spaces like station plazas, noise walls, landscaping against the walls, all of that has been influenced and designed by an international design competition, and it all reflects community input. So we consulted for a number of months, and in partnership with the community and the city, launched an international design competition, which was won by a Canadian firm called O2 Design and Planning. And they put together a really cool proposal that includes low carbon materials, wayfinding, lighting, landscaping, all designed to reflect community needs and characteristics and create safe and inclusive spaces. And I will add that new noise barriers are already installed and being installed that will make it a quieter corridor than it is today with existing GO trains. Moving right along, we're going to take a big jump now to north of Bloor Street and beyond. So in the northern stretch of the project, excavation is well underway at a number or all of our stations. We're in the process of digging out beneath Pape Station, which will be an interchange station on the new line, reinforcing the existing subway tunnels and preparing to build beneath it. Of course, we're building those bridges across the Don Valley. We just moved the half of one into place in the lower Don Valley a few weeks ago. We're also in the midst of building 2 more across the full Don Valley. Imagine building another Bloor Street viaduct like you've got on the screen right here. We're doing 2 of those. And so the lower the lower of the 2 bridges in this rendering is actually the new one that we're going to build that will take trains in and out of Thorncliffe Park. I didn't show it, but I did mention that lower Don Bridge. There's video footage of it on the web moving into place over the course of a weekend not too long ago. Continuing to the north, we have Flemington Park Station here, and ground's been broken at this station, Thorncliffe Park Station and the Don Valley Station and Cosburn Station, as well as the elevated guideway and track that's going to take the trains between these 3 stations. And speaking of the trains, I'd be remiss if I didn't speak to the rolling stock when I'm at a Railway Museum event. I won't dwell a ton on this, and I apologize. I know for all the rolling stock fans in the audience tonight, this will be an old rendering. I'm sure you've seen it before. The reason why we don't have something new is because we're in the midst of working through the design process with our contractor, Connect 6. So the trains are going to have quite a few unique features, including the fact that they'll be driverless. In order to make that work, the new system is going to use platform doors, which is really a first in the city for a subway. The only place we have an equivalent right now is at the Up Express at Union Station. And the intent is that the doors keep people and belongings and debris off of the tracks, which, as we know from the TTC, can be a major cause of reliability issues with the existing subways. And why don't we wrap up by switching over to the Scarborough Subway Extension, 7.8 kilometers long, 3 new stations, and bringing higher order transit to the Scarborough Health Network General Campus, as well as reconnecting the Scarborough Town Centre to higher order transit. And this project bringing, again, tens of thousands of people within walking distance of transit. It is a big year for SSE. Tunneling is over halfway done, as was announced at our Metrolinx board meeting last month. We are using the largest TBM ever used on a project in Canada. It's 11 meters wide, taller than two giraffes, about as long as three GO train cars. And again, that's compared to TBMs about 6 meters wide for the Ontario line and ECWE. The TBM, as I said, is over halfway done, tunneling and heading south towards the Lawrence East Station, reaching a peak depth of 35 meters. And speaking of stations, it's a big year for excavation on the Scarborough Subway Extension. Here we've got Kennedy Station, where we're building out the station to connect to the eventual extension. Beyond excavation, I'll say at this station, I'm really looking forward to hopefully next month, we'll be installing artwork on the construction hoarding that was put together by a youth art program done in partnership with the Don Montgomery Community Recreation Center. And so just one of the neat things we're able to do with communities across the city and the region. And here's a quick snapshot of the Scarborough Centre Station site, one of the biggest sites on the project. Before I leave Scarborough, I want to recognize everyone that took part in our consultations about the interior design of stations. We had wanted to find ways to make the color schemes and the walls and tiling and patterns reflect Scarborough and what makes Scarborough unique. So we asked residents to tell us, what are you proud of about Scarborough? And we heard about diversity and nature and food and history through 2 rounds of consultations. And now our designers are building that into the design scheme for each of the stations. And before I leave Scarborough Subway Extension, I do want to put a shout out. If any of you live in Scarborough and are interested in volunteering, we plan to be launching the Construction Liaison Committee for the project a little later this year. And so I'd encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter, through which we'll do an expression of interest and a shout out and a call out for volunteers. Ryan and Alex, I know I'm coming up on time, so I'm going to just conclude with a couple moments speaking to community engagement. Again, I'm a community engagement director, so this is my bread and butter. Ultimately, our efforts are fourfold as it relates to construction projects. We try to put the community first and bring community first construction decisions to projects where possible. And we do that, as I mentioned earlier, by sitting in on those construction planning meetings, looking at those project plans, trying to anticipate how people and communities will respond to and react to what's happening. We strive to reduce the disruption of construction, keep communities engaged, and certainly promote the benefits of construction. We do that with a whole range of people across the city: customer residents, business owners, BIAs, community groups, elected officials at all 3 levels of government. We work with municipal staff for the City of Toronto each and every day, and as well as utility providers like Toronto Hydro, Bell, and others. And my last 2 slides here as we come in for a landing at 7:46. Broadly speaking, 2 main goals for community engagement at Metrolinx, and I recognize this isn't something that we talk about that often, but the first is construction mitigation. So again, reducing impacts. And here I would just say the principle is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so we try to spot anything that's going to be noisy, dirty, cause vibrations, or take place overnight. Or maybe it's happening near a school or a senior's home or a hospital or a residential area. We take that back to the construction team and we'll say, well, you're doing something near a school. Have you thought about pickup and drop off time? How are you going to keep the kids safe? What about noise? What about dust in the schoolyard? And we challenge construction teams. And we in turn are challenged by community members. And I'm grateful for that. We facilitate 15 local construction liaison committees across those projects that I've described, the 3 ones under construction. And the intent there is that community members can tell us about their communities, what's important to them, how they move around, and so on, and how construction might impact them. So ideally, we're reducing that likelihood. I get it though. We also need to be reactive, and you might be saying this like Darren. You're living in a dream world if construction doesn't cause problems. And you're right. It's an incredibly built up city, the largest in Canada, and so construction can be disruptive. So we're reactive as well. We get inquiries each month, every day by phone, email, walk-ins in our community offices. And if something on site's a nuisance, we'll do our best to get it changed. So, for example, if there are lights on overnight at a site and they're shining in your window, we'll do your best to get them pointed, our best to get them pointed back towards the site and away from your window, so long as it's keeping people on site safe overnight. And we're not in it alone. We require the same from our contractors, this mentality, and we require them increasingly we force them to take steps to protect communities and reduce impacts in communities. And I'll wrap it up right here just to say that if our mitigation teams focus on the day to day, our strategic engagement staff members keep their eye on the horizon. And I think this is just perfect for a group this evening of transit fans and railway fans. The strategy team is able to lift themselves up out of the day-to-day fray of construction and build partnerships in our communities. And they do things like host tours of construction sites and tree giveaways and park cleanups and the art that I mentioned before. And hey, just last year we organized 2 Ontario Line James Walk tours. And just but one example, we had somebody drive 5 hours from Ottawa to take part in a tour on the Saturday. He spent the night, and then he did the other tour we offered the next day. And I thought it was a powerful moment, in transit enthusiasm and railway enthusiasm. And when you're up to your elbows in construction delivery, as I often am, you can forget about the bigger picture and what we're all a part of here in the city of Toronto. Truly, this transit build is going to change the face of this city for generations. And what an incredible time to be living here. So, Alex, Ryan, with that, I'll wrap it up. I know we've got probably just under 10 minutes, and a bunch of questions are probably rolling in. Haven't had a chance to look at them all yet, but I'll turn it over to you to help moderate them. I will say, again, my specialty is not Go, and it's not projects outside the city of Toronto. It really is those 3 construction projects under on being built in the city of Toronto right now. So for those questions that are about other topics, I would probably struggle to answer them, but I'd be pleased to bring in some of my colleagues to speak at a future event. Maybe we could bring in a couple to talk about everything in the 905 area code, and happy to bring in experts to talk to technical design details and so on, if that's of interest. Okay, Alex, I'm done. Back to you.
Part 2 coming soon. But Ryan, looks like we have lots of questions. Let's get into some.
Thank you, Darren. Very informative talk, very interesting. Of course, something that I think impacts the lives of most of us in this audience. We appreciate you doing this. I especially appreciated some of the up-to-date images with the TBMs. I love the paint jobs, and just seeing some of the work that's being done, I think, as recently as a couple weeks ago. So thank you for sharing that. We do have a dozen questions or so currently in the Q&A. I will encourage our audience members that if you do have a question for Darren, please enter it into the chat. And if we are unable to get to your question this evening, we will forward them along for a future answer. So thank you for your patience and understanding. So Darren, first question comes from David Mackey. David's question is, will the Ontario Line 4-car train sets be capable of being lengthened or run in multiple sets to accommodate the growth in ridership that you anticipate?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say that yes, they can be expanded. So at present, as you said, we've got the 4 railway cars, and as we continue to go through the design phase, we will be keeping an eye at the demographics, the population shifts within the City of Toronto, and there is that possibility that they can be extended to add, I think it's a fifth car, if demand warrants.
Thanks, Darren. This next one is from Juris, and Juris asks an interesting logistical question. Where is all the dirt going from the excavations of these TBMs?
Oh my goodness, amazing! That's an amazing question, and I'm just racking my brains to think about specifically where it is going. Typically, we're asked about whether it's going to specific spots or how it's being dumped. But let me just say, each contractor works with a series of subcontractors, so trucking companies that they procure to haul the muck away, so the dirt, the soil, the rocks, and so on away. All of that is governed by Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, or MECP regulations about soil disposal and so on. So they're taking to sites, I believe, around the GTA that are equipped to accommodate that, and they're safely disposed of.
That's a good answer. Thank you. And just a reminder of how much is involved in this entire process.
Yeah, and one thing I didn't touch on was truck safety. And like, if you think about it, there are hundreds of dump trucks and other trucks on the streets of the City of Toronto as a result of these projects, and into the years ahead, there will be more. So one of the things is that for the Ontario line, we've worked very closely with the City of Toronto to design a truck safety plan to make sure that they're getting in and out of the city safely. And we're in the midst of building those for the other projects as well, but we work hand in hand with city staff. So any trucks on the road right now are only following routes that were agreed to by the City of Toronto.
That's very good. I know how important public safety is to Metrolinx. Next question for you, Darren. This is from Andrew Jeans. He asks, what is Metrolinx doing to ensure that the history of its projects are properly documented and passed along to future generations? Of course, a question I'm very interested in as a historian and curator as well.
Yeah. I would say a couple of things. So, first off, that's a really good question, and it might even be insightful in a way that you don't realize. In that we're an organization that has grown significantly over the last several years. As you can tell, we've been given a massive mandate, and we've grown quite a bit to deliver on all of this construction. And so it really is important. So first off, we're building that institutional knowledge and keeping careful records about how these projects are being built, the decisions that are being made. And then as projects come online, like Finch and the Crosstown, those staff are moving to other projects to bring that knowledge forward. Also, maybe I'll touch on something that's maybe a bit tangential, but we've also received requests from community members to help preserve the history of the sites where we are building. And so we take that into consideration, and we consult communities through our construction liaison committees and contemplating things like historical plaques. So the Corktown site near Front and Parliament's a great example, but we've been asked the same about the Moss Park site for the Ontario line. And so those are all things that we consider as we're building the station, to recognize and commemorate the history of the neighborhood.
Very good. I think collectively we can do a much better job at commemorating the history of this city. So we appreciate the part that Metrolinx is taking. This is sort of a two-part question for you, Darren. Comes from Charles McLeod. And Charles asks, when do you expect, classic question, when do you expect the Ontario line to be open for regular service? And likewise, also from Charles, can you speak to the expected opening for the Eglinton West LRT opening?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'll start with the Ontario line, and for that one, I'll use the words of our CEO and say we're targeting the early 2030s, expecting the civil construction, so like the hard construction, to be done by or around 2030. and then an extended period of testing and commissioning and so on. And that being, of course, a big lesson learned from the Crosstown and Finch. You can't undercut the amount of time spent for that, though we will certainly be looking for efficiencies in doing that. But that'll take us into the 2030s. For ECWE, I imagine the same principles apply. But as I understand it, that one will probably be a bit early, just because of how much progress has been made and the ability to integrate with the existing Crosstown. So I hope that's helpful. Our CEO right now is speaking in terms of date ranges rather than trying to put a specific fine point on one date. I get that can be a bit frustrating, just as any of us would want a renovation or a new home being closed to have a very specific date. It just reflects the reality of a post-pandemic world, supply chain dynamics that have shifted, the private sector that has shifted, and just world events around us that influence mega projects like these in ways that really weren't expected pre-pandemic.
Thank you, Darren. Our timelines, is that the most common question you get from the public? Or is it
It
something?
definitely is.
Yeah,
Yeah, you bet. Well, actually, up until Feb 8th, it was when will the Crosstown open? And now it will be are you on time with your projects? When are they going to open?
of course.
Yeah.
Another logistical question. This one is from Jeff Thompson. And Jeff
Mhm.
asks, what will bring the users down into the deep tunnels from the city level?
Yeah. Great question. So it definitely will have escalators and we'll have elevators. We have to adhere to strict building code requirements for accessibility. I'm trying to stretch back into a past life to remember if the AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, would apply in this respect, and I believe it would. And then stairs as well. One of the complicating factors in terms of station depth is that there can also be a bit of a trade-off in terms of rider experience. So the depth is needed to get beneath the existing tunnels and city infrastructure. The trade-off is that it takes longer for passengers to get down there, so it can impact that passenger experience. So the goal is to get you down there just as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is interesting. And Darren, could you speak a little bit to how you're getting some of the workforce down the shafts as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So for them, we've got elevators that are taking them back and forth. And again, some people, much like the tunnel boring machines, they'll spend the entirety of their day down there. As, for example, as they're excavating the cavern out between both sites at King and Bathurst. Like they spend the entire day down there digging away with the rotor headers and other equipment, and then come out with pretty sizable, significant elevators that bring them up back to the surface level.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting and just kind of going on without a lot of people realizing just
Absolutely.
how massive this is and
Well,
how large the manpower is underground.
yeah.
Just maybe time for one or two more, Darren.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of the tracks, this is a question from Sundar. Will the tracks be electrified? If you can speak to any three of the projects.
Yeah, so the Ontario line it will be an electric subway system. I believe the Crosstown is already, so therefore the ECWE would be, and the Scarborough Subway Extension would just continue the existing line to technology. I understand the TTC has plans to replace those cars, though don't have much insight on those. So those are the plans for the three subway projects.
Thanks, Darren. And maybe just one last question to wrap up. You know, as you are a director of community engagement, what would be the one takeaway for our audience tonight as they think about this talk, as they express what they learned tonight from their friends and family, and as they go on from this? What would you say to our audience?
Yeah, I've talked a lot about what I call hard construction, right? Tunneling and drilling and gantries and so on. But behind all of this, you have an incredible crowd of professionals from around the world. I work alongside people from France and Spain and Great Britain and Dubai and Australia and Pakistan. And truly, we have some of the best and brightest from around the world bringing their rail capacity to the city of Toronto for this once in a generation build. And they do care about the impacts of construction in the city. So we make every effort to reduce those nuisances, and we certainly encourage you, friends, colleagues, to get in touch if you've got a question, if you've got an idea, a suggestion. We'd love to hear it, both about how we can reduce the impacts of construction, but also how we can bring these projects to life across the city. And maybe Ryan, I'll just give a shout out as well, because I might have missed this in the remarks, but for the Ontario line, I did mention our Jane's Walks tours, but we also have a public tours program we've launched for that project. We're looking to launch it for the other two as well. So take a look at the Ontario line website, the events section. Pretty soon we'll have some tours up for the spring. They're free to take part. We just asked people to RSVP in advance. We hosted 3 or 4 last fall, and they were all sold out. They're free, but they were all sold out. And we'd love for everybody on the line tonight to take part in those. Oh, and on screen, that's the link to subscribe to our newsletters. It could be that many people around the virtual table tonight are already subscribed, but I wouldn't miss an opportunity to encourage you to do that, to keep up on the latest and greatest with these new projects.
Thank you, Darren. That's all well said. And I'll speak for the audience to say we really appreciate the transparency, the great information, the openness, and we hope we can make this a regular chat.
Count me in, and I'm happy to volunteer my colleagues to come back next time as well.
Perfect.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it seems that we have talks until at least the early 2030s, so I love that. Make this an annual update. Yeah, so thank you, Darren. And thank you. If you have any more questions, do feel free to reach out to us. We will forward them along to Darren tomorrow as well. But otherwise, have a good evening, everyone. Happy spring, hopefully. We keep spring going here, and we'll see you all back on the second Tuesday of April as we discuss Toronto's heritage infrastructure and some of the sites that no longer exist. So from the future into the past again. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Darren, and have a good evening.